Hi, we're designers. So we love design that comes from a lot of professional research, but we also really enjoy design that happens with chance and circumstances. So in an increasingly global world with an increasingly global and ubiquitous design, how do we retain the sense of local identity?
So our story starts in 2010 when one night, late at night, we were listening to Radio 4 and there was this really evocative program about the problem of sea plastic, and they were on a research vessel that was leaving the marina at Rio de Janeiro, following a trail of plastic leading into the South Atlantic Gaia. And so we became really fascinated with the problem of plastic in our oceans, and we began researching the Gaias. And you hear these amazing figures like the UN estimates 100 million tons of plastic to be in our oceans, and where there's like areas of concentration, they think there's 10 times more plastic to plankton. But what do these figures mean? It was like too big to get our heads around. So one day we drove out of London and we went to a place in the UK which has the highest number of plastic pieces on the beach. And so we arrived one night and slept in the car, and the next morning we woke up expecting to see this amazing kind of beach of plastic, and it was a beautiful, pristine beach, and we were very disappointed. But we started like investigating further, and we noticed that actually there was a huge amount of plastic on the beach in tiny particles, particularly nurdles, which are these pellets. And these pellets are what all plastic products start as. They're like the raw ingredient that get melted down to then be made into stuff. And so this is ending up in our oceans without us even using it once. And it's one of the most shipped products around the world. And they fall off shipping containers or they get swept down rivers from factories, and they lead to being one of the most common items on the beach. And so we began to collect these by hand, and it's very laborious to separate them. And so we knew there had to be a better way. And the problem with small pieces of plastic is that as plastic gets smaller, its surface area increases and it absorbs more toxins. And so it forms these little toxic pills that when they go up the food chain, because they look like fish eggs, they're eaten by fish. And so when it goes up, it's times by 10 each time. So all our food is getting more toxic. And so when we were down there, we were collecting this material, and this is like a kind of average beach sample. It's like a mix of organic matter and plastic. And so locals were telling us on this beach that there used to be an industry of panning on the beach, not for plastic, obviously, but for precious metals like gold and tin. And so we returned to London, visited somebody at the Natural History Museum, a geologist, who taught us about how to separate minerals through flotation. And so we made this device we call the nurdler, which enabled us to sort a lot more plastic and organic material. And so we had the plastic separated, which we wanted to do something with, and we were also left with this organic material. And we found that the organic material could be pressed and dried into briquettes, which could be used as a fuel. So then we made a furnace. And we were able to start melting and pressing the plastic into sheet material. And with larger pieces of plastic, we could separate it into colors. And so we're inspired by, in the past, sailors would go to sea in wooden boats, and they used to have the carpentry skills to repair these boats at sea. And so in their spare time, they'd whittle away at driftwood or maybe whalebone or even walrus tusks to make ship stools. And so we wanted to make our own ship stool at sea. So we started getting up at 4 and joining fishing crews. And we found that it was that every inch of the boat is used, and it was apparent that our furnace was completely inappropriate to take to sea. So we made a much smaller version of our furnace that we could take on board. It has a charcoal filter, so it filters out the fumes. and we wanted to make it as cheap and accessible as possible. So the whole furnace that we took on board can be made on a kitchen table for as little as £10. And the chair that we made, they're always tagged with a geographic location of where they were fished. And so this is the manual that you can download for making a furnace and the chair. And so the idea's really taken off, and we get photographs sent to us all the time from around the world of people making their own things out of sea plastic. And so this is made in Chile.
So from a small fishing village, we moved to a giant metropolis. Sao Paulo has the population of 20 million people and has the highest number of high-rises and also the largest helicopter fleet in the world after New York. With a city this big, you'd think that there's a very sophisticated way of collecting rubbish. But actually, most of the rubbish, 80%, is collected by these men called catadores. And these men go around the city with their handmade carts collecting recycled items to take to scrap yards to exchange them for, they sell them by kilo. So there are around 800,000 people working this way in Brazil, and we wanted to work with them. So we wanted to investigate how these catadores make their living could be extended beyond rubbish collection. So we started investigating how they collected and what they were collecting, and we wanted to learn from them and come up with a new model of manufacturing for the city. Sao Paulo is the capital of aluminium, and they recycle more drinking cans than anywhere in the world, and the metal goes from can to can in just 30 days. So we wanted to use this abundant aluminium. So we were researching about how to make a furnace, and we made one. And so next we went to one of the city's largest scrap yards, and we collected pieces of metal, and we made a furnace out of old beer barrel. We were also inspired by various food carts around the city. It's very inventive, and go around the city. One is for ice cream, popcorn, and sticked meat. And also we wanted to make our furnace mobile so that it can be taken around the city and it can be fired anywhere on the spot. So next, we needed to find a cheap and plentiful fuel. So we looked at Sao Paulo's food industry, and they consume a lot of fried food. And there's a cafe on every street corner, and there's street markets every day of the week serving fried food. So we went there to collect some waste vegetable oil. So we made and constructed this furnace. You just need a few bits of scrap wood to start the fire, and then after that you can just use waste vegetable oil, and basically the leaf blower blows wind at a high speed, and the heat turns the oil into vapor, and it heats the furnace, and it melts the aluminium cans into liquid. And so this production is the material, which is the aluminium cans, and also the fuel, vegetable oil, are both free, and it sustains this kind of self-production. So next we looked into molds. The traditional mold is either iron or stainless steel, and they're too expensive, and also it doesn't give the flexibility of changing shape if you want to change your design after you've made this mold. So we looked into an ancient casting technique using sand, and we went to one of the city's many construction sites to get our sand. So next we needed to find something to cast with. So we went around the streets collecting objects we found on the streets to make them into pieces of furniture, and to press against the sand to make the actual mold. This is the diagram of the furnace. And so then you tap the plug out and the fluid aluminium flows out, and then you you pour the metal into the sand cast to make the furniture. And the result is the opposite to the conventional aluminium furniture, which is very industrial looking and uniform. And the mobile furnace adapts to the skills and the material that's readily available on the street, and it can be taken to anywhere around the world, and it can be adapted to produce an infinite amount of products, not just chairs.
And so I'll just introduce you to a project that we've just embarked on. It's called Mare, and it's based in Rio. And we're looking into Guanabara Bay, which is the bay of Rio de Janeiro, and it has 4 cities surrounding it. And 80% of the plastic in our ocean actually comes from the land. And so we want to get this plastic at source. And when it gets into the bay, it's in large enough concentrations that it can be fished more economically. And it's still large enough that it hasn't been broken down yet by the sunlight and the currents. And this plastic would eventually flow out into the South Atlantic Gyre. So we want to capture it closer to where it first enters the water. We've got a fantastic team. It's still growing in Brazil, working on it. And we're working towards the Rio Olympics 2016, where we'll have boats with which are able to collect and process the plastic to make products during that time. And so in conclusion, when we're in a world with an increasing global population and finite resources, we can really learn from vernacular design on using abundant local resources, investigating how to produce things locally, and retaining a strong kind of design identity. Thank you.